The city was already awake, humming with engines, footsteps, and the restless energy of people chasing somewhere else. Daniel Cross stepped out of his sleek black car and adjusted the cuffs of his tailored coat, the fabric smooth and heavy with quiet luxury. Skyscrapers reflected the pale morning light, and somewhere above, his name sat on glass doors and business magazines. He had built all of this from nothing, and that fact had become both his pride and his shield. Beside him, his 7-year-old son Leo clutched his hand, his small fingers warm against Daniel's cold, efficient grip. They walked down the sidewalk toward Leo's school, Daniel's mind already drifting to meetings and numbers. He barely noticed the woman sitting near the corner, her back pressed against a brick wall, knees drawn close to her chest. She wore a thin shawl that did little to fight the damp chill in the air. A paper cup rested by her feet, nearly empty. Daniel saw her the way most people did, not as a person, but as an obstacle to be stepped around. His eyes slid past her, his pace quickening, as if speed alone could erase discomfort. Leo, however, slowed. His steps grew uneven, his gaze fixed behind them. Daniel felt the tug on his hand and frowned. "Come on," he said, not unkindly but firmly. He had no patience for delays. Leo didn't answer. Instead, he stopped completely. Daniel turned, annoyance rising, ready to lecture his son about being late. But Leo slipped his hand free and took a step backward. Daniel opened his mouth to scold him, and then he saw his son's face. Leo wasn't distracted. He wasn't curious. He looked stunned, as though he had just found something he'd lost and never expected to see again. His wide eyes were locked on the woman by the wall. "Dad," Leo said softly, his voice trembling in a way Daniel had never heard before. "That's Mom." The words hit the air and shattered it. Daniel let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Leo, don't say things like that," he replied automatically. His heart, however, had begun to pound. Leo ignored him and walked closer to the woman, his small shoes splashing through a shallow puddle. He knelt in front of her, studying her face with intense focus, as if confirming a memory only he carried. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were tired, clouded by hardship, but when they met Leo's, they widened in shock. Her lips parted, and for a moment no sound came out. Then her breath caught, sharp and broken. "Leo," she whispered, her voice fragile, almost afraid of itself. Daniel froze. The sound of her voice cut straight through him, dragging the past into the present without mercy. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in 7 years, not since the night he chose ambition over love, walking away with promises he never kept. The city noise faded, the morning rush blurring into silence. Daniel Cross, a man who never looked back, stood rooted to the pavement as the truth he had ignored finally rose up and called his name. Daniel found himself lowering to his knees without fully deciding to do so, the expensive fabric of his trousers touching the cold, gritty sidewalk. The sound of passing traffic felt distant now, muffled, as if the city itself had stepped back to watch. He stared at the woman's face, really looked at it, past the dirt and the exhaustion carved into her features. Beneath it all, he saw her, the woman he had once loved with a reckless, hopeful heart. Anna. Time had changed her, but it hadn't erased her. It never could. Leo stood close to her, his small hands resting on his knees as he looked up at her with a shy, almost reverent smile. Anna reached out slowly, her fingers trembling as if she feared this moment might vanish if she moved too fast. When her hand touched Leo's cheek, she broke. Tears spilled freely now, tracing paths down her face as years of silence and survival collapsed into a single breath. "You're real," she whispered, half laughing, half crying. "I dreamed about you so many nights. I thought maybe my mind was just being cruel." Daniel swallowed hard. Guilt rose in his chest like a tide, heavy and unforgiving. He had rehearsed apologies in his head for years, convincing himself he would someday deliver them when the timing was right. Standing there now, he realized there was no right time, only this moment, painfully overdue. Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low and uneven. It wasn't accusation, but confusion, heartbreak, and shame tangled together. Anna's eyes dropped to the pavement. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was steady, but only because she had practiced being strong when no one was watching. "Life happened," she said simply. Jobs that promised stability disappeared. Rent climbed higher than her wages. When she got sick, there was no one to cover shifts or watch Leo. One missed payment became two, then everything unraveled. She never looked for Daniel. Pride had sealed her lips, and love for her son told her he deserved a father who chose him freely, not out of guilt. Daniel felt each word land like a quiet blow. He took off his coat, the one that had cost more than her monthly rent once did, and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched at first, unused to kindness, then relaxed, clutching it closed as warmth spread through her hands. "I told myself I was doing the right thing," Daniel said, his voice breaking despite his effort to control it. "I thought if I succeeded, everything would somehow be justified." He looked at Leo, then back at Anna. "I was wrong." Leo reached out and took both of their hands, linking them together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Can we go home now?" he asked softly. The word home echoed in Daniel's chest, hollow and hopeful all at once. He nodded, tears blurring his vision. For the first time in years, Daniel Cross wasn't thinking about where he was going next, only about who he would not leave behind again. The apartment overlooked the city like a quiet observer, high above the streets where lives brushed past one another without ever truly meeting. Warm light filled the rooms as Daniel closed the door behind them, the soft click sounding final, almost ceremonial. Anna stood just inside, her hands folded tightly in front of her, unsure where to step, as if the polished floor might reject her. Leo, however, let go of both their hands and wandered in freely, his curiosity blooming now that fear had loosened its grip. "It's big," Leo said in awe, patting toward the window. He pressed his forehead to the glass and laughed softly at the tiny cars far below. Daniel watched him, heart heavy and full at once. This was the life he had built, space, comfort, safety, but it had been hollow without the laughter of a child and the presence of the woman he once loved. Anna remained standing until Daniel gently pulled out a chair for her. "You can sit," he said, his voice careful, as if every word mattered now. She sat slowly, eyes roaming the room, taking in what years of struggle had kept out of reach. Yet there was no envy in her gaze, only exhaustion and disbelief. Daniel brought her food, simple but warm. She hesitated, then ate, each bite restoring something deeper than hunger. Leo joined her, chattering about school and his favorite stories, as if the lost years could be stitched back together with words alone. Anna listened, smiling through tears, memorizing every sound of her son's voice. That night, Daniel barely slept. He sat at the edge of his bed, listening to the soft rhythm of Leo's breathing in the next room, to the faint movements of Anna as she adjusted to a bed that didn't creak or leak cold air. Regret pressed down on him, but alongside it grew a quiet resolve. He couldn't change the past, but he could show up now, fully, honestly, without excuses. Days turned into weeks. Daniel rearranged his schedule, cancelled meetings that once ruled his life. He walked Leo to school every morning. He listened as Anna spoke about the years she survived alone, never interrupting, never defending himself. Healing came slowly, unevenly, but it came. One evening, as the sun painted the skyline in gold and amber, Leo sat between them on the couch, his head resting first on his mother's shoulder, then his father's. "I knew you'd stop," he murmured sleepily. "I just knew it." Daniel closed his eyes, emotion tightening his throat. He realized then that the moment he ignored a beggar had nearly cost him everything that truly mattered. It took a child's courage to make him turn back, to see the life he had abandoned and the love still waiting for him. Outside, the city rushed on, indifferent as ever. Inside, a family slowly rebuilt itself, not with wealth or apologies alone, but with presence, patience, and the simple, powerful choice to never walk past love again.